Unlock the high returns of the expanding venture capital world right here on the Emerging Managers Podcast.
Hey, Scott. So we've got the second Mike. We've got Mike Warren, Alethia Venture Partners, and it's also in this spirits beverage. You're kind of covering this area.
They have a much broader approach to beverages. Obviously, they have products in the alcohol and spirit space, but they also have non-alcoholic waters, specialty brands in the beverage space, and they even have technology companies that enable beverage companies. So they have a pretty broad approach to how they approach how they handle the spirits and beverage industry as a whole.
And unlike our last Mike Solo, they look at this at the next stage of investment. So it's really like seed to Series A. So
yeah, they have an approach. They really come in and provide coaching and like Mike to some extent, but they're really about building the business for a faster exit. Their exit horizon is 3 to 5 years. So they're turbocharging these entrepreneurs with a ton of resources of bringing in their experience in investment banking and the CPG industry to really bring these companies to a successful conclusion sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, let's get Mike Warren of Alethia Venture Partners, specializing in investing in these young seed to Series A stage beverage companies with revenues between $500,000 and $8 million. His investment strategy emphasizes strong local presence and primarily targets strong operators and founders. His portfolio includes ventures like Maker, Wine in a Can, Haywell, functional non-alcoholic beverages. I love that that's a category, Scott. KPU, environmentally safe canned water, and Gay Water vodka soda. So they've got quite a broad brush of different types of beverages, as you were pointing out. Let's hear from Mike Warren.
Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Kelly, your host of the Emerging Managers Podcast and the founder and CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners. And I'm excited to bring a venture capitalist in a very space that's near dear to my heart as an Irishman, and that's the beverage industry. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm great. So before we get into Alethia and what you're doing in the beverage space, share a little bit about your background prior to launching the fund.
Sure. So this is I'll do the abridged version, but the reality is I was born into this business. My dad was a buyer for 2 major grocery chains in Southern California for 40 plus years. Mm-hmm. And he was the alcohol, tobacco, and candy buyer, amongst other things. So you can imagine what was around my house all the time. It was booze, smokes, chewing tobacco, and and a bunch of candy products. So I grew up around the business. I grew up in the business. We spent a lot of summers growing up, going up to Napa, going to different manufacturing facilities, whether it was beverage or any type of dry goods, canned goods. So I really got an indoctrination into food and beverage, from the time I was a kid. Our garage was like a convenience store, and all my buddies, after school would come up and, raid the shelves in the garage. So that's how I got started. And then, I took a couple of traditional routes. I worked at the grocery store level when I was about 15. And then my dad helped my brother and I start a warehousing business in the logistics space within Certified Grocers, which is now Unified Grocers, Alpha Beta Markets, Skaggs, Ralph's, Vons, Stater Brothers, Food for Less, all the majors. My brother and I would go into the warehouses and we would repack, resalvage, and make sure products got from damaged goods into the retail supply chain. And so I did that for a while, actually ran that business, sold it when I was 28 years old. I bought my brother out when we were in our early 20s. But I had worked for everybody from Coca-Cola to Sunshine Biscuits, Kingsford Charcoal, McCormick Schilling. I had worked for just about every manufacturer, every broker, Bradshaw, Bromar, Kelly Clark, several other major, national and local brokers. I had worked for all of them in one area of the business in food and beverage. So it's a space I intimately know, and it's a space that I love, and it's a very fun space. There's a lot of fun people in it. Getting to see new products, getting to see how the products progress over a life cycle, how they change, how different personnel changes. It's so fascinating. So, when I was 28 and I sold that business, I went into the securities industry, became a stockbroker. But I always kept getting sucked back into the food space. And during my 20 plus years in the financial sector, investment banking and private equity, I ran a few different food companies, energy drinks, vitamins, things like that. So I never left the space. I just enhanced the space with the investment banking side of it. But I've been a food and bev guy since I was running around in cowboy boots and diapers. I mean, that's kind of what I did. So
that's awesome. Thanks for that background. So let's fast forward to what you're doing with the fund now. Talk a little bit about the thesis. Where are you investing? How are you investing? And let's talk about the fund a little bit.
Okay, so listen, I'm a pretty honest, raw guy. So I don't want to paint a picture for your audience or LPs or anybody else that running a fund is an easy deal, because it is not, and it is time consuming. It's expensive. It is painful, and it is just. I mean, it takes every ounce of your being 24/7, especially in the beverage space, which is what Fund One, as a first-time fund manager, an emerging fund, the bev space couldn't be harder to be in the last 2 years. Okay, so our thesis has been from the beginning. We really like young companies, and we like founders, and we like people who are actively engaged in the business. We don't look for companies that are, very far along in their valuations or in the food chain. We really like younger seed to maybe Series A type of people. They're doing 500,000 to maybe 8 million in revenue. And there's a lot of opportunity in that space. And so we really love going down that road because, number one, we can get valuations at a very reasonable and fair rate. We can help them with their growth cycle because every one of the general partners within the fund have a very specific skill set, from marketing to legal, accounting, and people in the people space. So we're able to do some things that some other funds really don't do, which is a lot of the consulting side and helping the funds understand, every part of their business. So if they're lacking somewhere, they're like, hey, we're trying to understand how to do a financial plan and forecasting. Well, one of our general partners, Logan Zinzer, the guy's a CPA. He's also the CFO of a multi-billion-dollar company. So it's easy for us to step in and do some things that other people don't. So the thesis is finding great companies at early valuations, helping them grow, and helping them get to exit within 5 to maybe 7 years. And that comes a lot in the beverage space after you reach $10 million of revenue. So that's why we like them under 10 million. We like to get them over 10. Once we get them there, if we can get them there, there's usually an exit waiting for us at the end of the tunnel.
So yeah. I want to touch on a couple of things you said. You said it's hard, especially in beverage. What makes investing in beverage space hard?
Well, so you've got two sides of beverage, right? You got the alc and then you got the non-alc. The alc side has had diminishing returns for the last couple of years. We've seen a bloodbath in lots of brands, including celebrity brands, and in across the board, from wine to spirit to beer. And the movement has really been to a lot of functional beverage, right? So a lot of the non-alc space. But the problem with the non-alc space is that there are so many entrants to the market that cutting through the clutter and understanding who actually is doing something that's new, that's refreshing, that is is going to make money, that has the ability to expand with operators that know what's going on, it makes it very difficult. Not to mention the fact that we've been through the last 2 years of probably the hardest cycle of raising capital I've ever seen in my 26 years of being in the investment banking world. Raising capital has been very difficult. Now, if you're an AI company, if you're a tech company, if you're something that's hot, there's still money to be had. But if you're in an industry where the market has been declining for the last 2 years, and then you couple it with interest rates, elections, and all kinds of other things that are, the roadblocks, especially for new managers, especially for new funds, especially for first-time funds, it becomes laborious. And where it used to be, I could go and raise capital very easily with 2, 3, 4 phone calls and meetings. Now it's 10, 11, 12 phone calls, meetings, due diligence, commitments, fallouts from commitments. I mean, it's a totally different market to raise capital in right now. And it has been for the last couple of years.
No, you're absolutely right. It's interesting. The two things you mentioned. Obviously, it's been a challenge the last couple of years, just because the markets, the lack of liquidity on the other side. There's a lot of capital out there. They're just not really allocating it. At the speed and velocity they have in the past. And it's interesting too. You mentioned the dynamics of alcohol consumption. Correct me if I'm wrong, but alcohol consumption among the younger generations is continually going down. So they're looking for other things or other ways. Is that a trend you're seeing, and how are you allocating accordingly?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it is definitely a trend we're seeing. But here's the other trend we're seeing with the younger drinkers on the alcohol consumption side. They're not drinking things that are not premium. Okay, so they've got a lot of these kids. They've got money now. They've figured out how to monetize the digital revolution we've been through. So a lot of these kids, and listen, when I was in Miami for a year during the last 2 years raising capital, I'd go out, I'd see all these influencers, I'd see all these kids, and they're ordering very expensive high-end liquor. They're not in their low-grade vodkas, low-grade whiskeys, low-grade gins. They're going after the stuff that's premium and super premium. They're ordering the Clase Azul tequilas at $40 a shot, right? They're ordering Weller products and things like that, where you could get into $60, $70, $80 a shot. Pappy Van Winkle's. I'm seeing stuff that I never saw in my generation. We always drank the cheap stuff, right? My dad hit a bottle in the trunk of his car that probably cost no more than $6, right? Right. Now kids are rolling around with Cristal in their Lamborghinis. It's a different market, and so you have to be a better marketer, number one, and you have to provide quality. So when we look for brands, I don't look for the cheapest brand. I don't look for the most economical brand. I look for brands that have premium products in it, whether it's alc or non-alc. I'm looking for premium stuff. If it costs more, okay. If it's better for you, okay. If it's great ingredients, okay. If it's organically made, okay. Don't mind the higher price tag, as long as you know how to market into that market to get people to keep buying it and getting it off the shelves. But if you don't, then you got a problem. But the youth, it's very interesting what's going on. Yes, the functional beverages are they're going after them. Things like ketones, right? We've got a brand we absolutely love called Key. It's a ketone brand. There is no there's no alcohol in this product, and this stuff is flying off the shelves. And it's because kids, they want something that picks them up but doesn't leave them feeling terrible at the end of it, like a Red Bull or a Monster or some of these other drinks that are insanely affordable, yet they're killing you from the inside. Right. Another brand that we really love on the non-alc space that we're invested in is called Haywell. They're functional products, amazing ingredients, two amazing founders that are operators that came from big beverage companies. And this stuff, again, they cannot keep up with the demand because it is functional. It works. We've tried it. We've tested it, and it's fantastic. So yeah, the shift it's interesting, but people are still drinking. Let's not be fooled. I mean, I went out for dinner last night. I had 2 margaritas, right?
Yep.
I didn't stop myself and say, hey, I'm going to have, 2 waters and half a margarita. I was like, yeah, let's have some. And I see that all the time. But yes, the trend. And listen, the other thing is that people, are afraid to talk about, that I'm not, is that, the market's just glutted with product. Okay. The wine industry is in shambles right now. And it's because it's got too much product. You look at how many wines are, you go into a Total Wine, a Bevmo, a Go Puff, any one of these stores, and just walk down the aisle that has Cabernets, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be a sommelier to know what you're looking at in that place anymore. There's so many choices, and many of those choices are owned by the same, 3, 4, 5 companies. They have flooded the market with too much product, and it's across the board. How many more whiskeys do we need? How many more vodkas on the shelf do we need? How many more gins do we need? How many more anything do we need? Right? The market is flooded. So of course it's going to have a decline, which is where, for your LPs and people that watch the show, is where the opportunity exists. Okay.
Right.
Let's
touch on that. Obviously, it is a glutted market. It is funny. My girlfriend and I went to Publix, the local supermarket here, and there's just so many to choose from. And you're right. There is a glut. So how do you, obviously you've got a great background in retail and buying, getting it off the shelf is one thing, getting it on the shelf is another thing. So talk about how you and your background and your team's background provide more value add to get through the glut, and use your expertise to do that.
That is, listen, I love this question for so many reasons, because one of the things that I see a lot when young brands come to us is they say, oh, we just signed up with a major distributor. Okay. One of the big 3. Okay. We all know who they are. I don't need to name them. Got lots of friends at all of them. Don't want to bash any of them, but let's be honest. When you're a rep and you're walking into a store and you've got a list of 400 items that you're trying to sell, how does any one of those brands, except for the top ones, cut through? Right. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I tell brands when they come to me, especially young brands, I tell them, do not go and sign a deal with a major distributor. You're going to get lost in the shuffle. You're going to spend money, and you're going to end up on the losing end of that. That's number 1. Number 2, do not go into 40 states or 30 states or 20 states when you start out as a brand. Get your local market, get your regional market, get your state market. Start expanding from there. Own your territory. If you can't make it in your own territory, you either need to move or get out of the business, because you're not doing it the right way. So start small, start local, become friends with the store owners, become friends with the bar owners. You want on-premise, start going in there and hanging out with the bar managers, hang out with the bartenders. You got to get a local presence, and you got to pound that so hard that it's undeniable that you could survive as a brand, even if you weren't in any other territories. If you can't make it locally, you can't make it at all. And just growing locally and managing your expenses and managing your spend of marketing so that you're not trying to cover too many territories and boil the ocean. I see so many brands that come to me and I look at their performas, and they're like, we're going to go from 500,000 this year to 6 million next year. I'm like, okay, explain that to me. Walk me through the process, right? And they're like, well, we're going to go into 30 states. And I'm like, okay, cool. So how much is that going to cost you? What are the stores you're going into? Who's going to distribute for you? And please tell me how much money you're going to need to create $6 million of revenue in a year. How much money are you going to actually need to fund that? And they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. I'm like, duh. Okay. Of course you didn't think about it, because a lot of people that come into this business, they don't have experience in this business, right? They come from other industries, but they went to a bar, they went to a restaurant, they went to somebody's home, and they said, man, that drink tastes terrible. I think I can make it better. And all of a sudden they're at a graphic artist getting a logo done. They're getting GoDaddy and finding a web name. They're creating all this stuff, but they haven't created the number one thing they need to create, which is how am I going to sell my product, not to one person, but to 1 + 1 + 1 + 1? And how am I going to get them to come back and buy it again? Right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can go from 500,000 to 6-7 million by distributing all your product out one time. But if your pull through isn't there, you go from 6 million back down to 500,000, then you go -2 million because you're in the hole. You got product, you got buybacks. People just don't understand the business. And luckily, my dad pounded that shit into my head from the time I was 5 years old.
Right.
If it doesn't go across the cash register and not come back, that's only step one. Step two is getting them to come back and put it through the cash register and not bring it back again. Step three is to get them to keep doing that, right? And so people don't understand that, Scott, and that's one thing to the business.
No, that is so spot on. You know, I tell companies we work with, I've worked with alcohol brands. I owned a stake in a microbrewery back in the day, and you know, I even owned a record label. And you know, the philosophy was, don't try to conquer the world to own your own backyard.
Yeah, man, you can't.
And there's so many things you can learn about how to scale the business. You know, I famously tell people, look, Jeff Bezos didn't rule everything until he ruled books.
Right.
You know, I had record labels all the time, you know, would come to me and they would want to go nationally. Go, first of all, if you can't get 300 people in your local bar to listen to your band, don't go on the road. You'll be talking to strangers. So
100%
spot on. And I'm glad that you are giving, you know, these entrepreneurs in the space that perspective. I think too much is built into this, you know, being the Yankees and hitting home runs. You know, hit for average for a while in your hometown and then expand from there. So I really
Scott, I listen, you're spot on too. And listen, I tell people this in this business. It's better to get hit by a pitch and get on base. Just get on base. I don't care. Take the hit, man. If they're throwing at your head, turn your head and take one, right?
Lean in. Yep.
Take it, man. Just lean in, right? You have to start small in this business. Hey, listen, we have a brand that we really love in the gin space, okay? And the founders, they had an exit about 1.5 years ago in a market that doesn't have an exit. Okay. There have not been a lot of exits in the alcohol market in the last couple of years. These guys got an exit and they did it right. They started in California. They really worked California. They went out and got a funding partner early in the game who ended up being their takeout partner a few years later. So they built it up to a decent revenue. They stayed in their own backyard and they got a life-changing exit in about 5 years. Okay. Right. That is such a great, they didn't say, oh, we're going to go be aviation and sell it for, you know, $1 billion. And they didn't go down that road. They stuck it to a small market and they built it. And a lot of brands could do that, but they have these dreams of grandeur. Oh my God, we're going to be the next Red Bull. You are not going to be the next Red Bull. Sorry, not going to happen. Okay. We're going to be the next Molson Coors. Sorry, not going to happen. Right? You don't have the money and you don't have the 50 years, 60 years to do it. Right? Your lifespan isn't even that big. So we try and get these entrepreneurs, because I love entrepreneurs. Man, I've started 20 businesses in my life. Okay. I've blown up half of them. Okay. And I've had a couple little exits with some of the other ones. I've done moderately well in my life. Okay. But I have learned some painful lessons along the way of doing that. And I have, you know, I can't tell you how much of my own money I've watched evaporate into space because I didn't make the right move or I didn't listen to the right person. And when I started doing that several years ago, I started having successes. And many of the people that mentored me and coached me early in my career, you know, they always told me, man, just bunt for a single, man. Don't you not have to get up and swing for the fences in any situation. If you're doing what you need to do, it will come to you. You won't have to go out and force it. And so the more I've done that, the more success I've had.
Yeah, that's great perspective. You know, it's a great, you know, tools and tricks of the trade by being in the trade that these entrepreneurs can take advantage of. Let's talk a little bit more about the LP. So you shared a little bit some of the brands that you work with. Maybe share some of the success stories and some of the emerging success stories you're working with now.
Well, there's a wine company that we absolutely love called Maker. These three ladies are absolutely brilliant. They have developed the only wine in a can that I've ever thought was worth its weight in gold. And I am a wine collector. I'm also a whiskey collector. So I have a fairly decent collection in my cellar of wines. Their wines in a can, I can take any $30 to $50 bottle of anything in my cellar and set it next to one of those cans, and those cans taste equally as good as any one of those wines. And they are killing it. I mean, they are doing so well. Contracts with United Airlines, they're increasing their coverage. And again, this is a company that started locally. They not only started locally, but they started during COVID. And during COVID, where we had all this direct to consumer stuff, they were doing virtual drink dates with companies. They went to corporations, and all three of these girls went to Stanford, got their MBAs. They're brilliant. Okay. But they did amazing marketing and got liquid to lips when you couldn't even leave your house without a mask on. Okay.
Right. And
And then they had a brilliant business plan moving forward. So they're one of our brands. We've got a sizable amount of money in them. We would always continue to support them. I think that's going to be an exit here, probably in 3 to 5 years, and a very, very sizable exit because of what they're doing. That's one of our companies. We have another company, like I talked about, Haywell, which is a functional brand, non-alcoholic. The two founders are women. They came from major industry leaders. They developed brands for those leaders that became number one in their space, one in the beer space, Blue Moon. Their product is I can't keep enough of it in the house. I love it. We've got a water product called Kopu. Kopu is a all aluminum can. It is environmentally safe. It's the best tasting water I've ever tasted in my life. It's in a lot of the hospitality sector, so you'll see it in Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton's, places like that. We have another product called Gay Water, which is a vodka soda. Spencer Hodson, who is the CEO of the company out of New York, this kid is as brilliant as anybody I've met. He knows what he's doing. He's in a niche market. We think that is another product and another service that's going to blow up. And listen, there's a theme here for us. Okay. I don't look for products. Okay. Products find us. I don't go out looking for products. What I look for is operators. I look for the people behind the scenes, the people that are operating the company. If I don't have founders and operators that know what they're doing, I don't care how good the brand is. I don't care what the name of it is. And I honestly, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I don't really care what the revenue is either. Okay. I know a lot of 10 to 15, $20 million revenue beverage brands that are run by bozos. Okay. That have no idea what they're doing. And, and they've just got a product that is smarter than they are. Okay. Right. So I look for operators first. We really look down that. And then the products, they speak for themselves. I mean, they really do. And we've been able to put six products in the portfolio so far. I see 5 to 7 deals a week right now. We are very, very picky about what goes in the fund. When I like a brand, I get behind it 100%. I even go as far as helping them raise capital outside of our fund. So if they have investors that are on the fence, they have funds that are on the fence that want, to know what my thoughts are, what my due diligence process was and all that. I am happy to help them close those investors because listen, a rising tide raises all ships. Sure. Right. So I want to see success across the platform, no matter what, but I want to see success with brands and operators that are premium, that are good.
That's awesome.
So that's really what we look for.
So let's talk about the LPs and let's talk about current investor profile and who a good LP would be. What's the makeup of some of your LPs now, and who are good potential LPs, for your fund?
Well, that's an interesting question because, the LP space right now is highly fragmented. I've talked to a lot of family offices that, quite honestly, they don't have to invest right now with the interest rate environment. You got 100, 200, $300 million, $500 million, $1 billion or two. Listen, you could sit on rates at 5% all day long and still send your grandkids to Harvard. Okay. You can still fuel the jet and the yacht with lots of fuel, for trips around the globe. So a lot of family offices I found, they get to the table and then they kind of shy off because another shiny object, comes across their desk. Right. And then you've got a lot of people who are finders out there who are teeing you up to this person, they want a piece and all that stuff. So it's just the market is really fragmented. And like you said earlier, there's a ton of money out there. Okay. There's a ton. Prying it out of people's hands is not as easy as it, as it used to be. Like if it was 21, 22, I could make 2 phone calls and I'd have $10 million sitting in the bank account because people were just throwing money around. Right. So the typical LP for us, I like somebody who has at least 250,000 to maybe $1 million of disposable income. Would we like, some people in the 2 to 5 million range? Who wouldn't? Right. Sure. Would I love an anchor at the, 10, 20 million range? Well, listen, I've sat down with some big funds who have all told me the same thing. Mike, we love what you're doing. You're a great operator. You pick winner companies, but we need to see you have a little more tenure in your fund before we can drop a $10 million check. So nobody really wants to take a chance on an emerging manager or a new fund with a big check until other bigger checks have come in the door, right? So it's a catch-22. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So at this point in our life cycle, I just like people who are cool people. You don't have to add anything unless you can, unless you want to. So I don't need strategics in the space to come in. I'm my own strategic, to be honest with you. And I'm not trying to say that with an ego. I just been in the business long enough. I know enough people. This is not my first rodeo of investing. So it could be anybody, Scott, honestly.
I appreciate that. So the question I typically like to close with, or close to close with, is in this sea of funds, 3,200 funds, 1,800 funds out there that are first-time funds, why your fund? Why now?
Listen, we are in a very, very specialized space, and there are very few funds in our space, okay, total, all right? So not just first-time managers, but I'm talking about guys who have second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth funds. Okay. There's only a handful of us out here with the knowledge and expertise and the, you'd say track record to know what we're doing, because the Bev space is tough, man. If everybody could do it, everybody would be doing it. And that's why there's so few of us. I can count maybe 10 funds total out there in our space that do what we do, know what we know the people we know how to pick the right companies, and have the ability to consult and move a company from inception to exit. Okay. So why my fund? I don't know. Why anybody's fund, Scott? Listen, the returns in beverage are ridiculous when you hit one. Okay. 3 to 5x, sometimes 7x on non-alc, 5 to, let's call it 35 or 40 on alc. Right? You put $1 in, you might just hit one that gives you $20 out, right? Or you might hit one that gives you $3 out. But it is a place that if you pick the right companies, you pick the right horse, pick the right jockey, you're gonna make it. And if you've got 20 or 30 portfolio companies, you've de-risked the fund entirely. In fact, anytime after about 7 or 8 companies, you've de-risked the fund completely anyway. You're at like a 80 or 90% de-risking on the fund. So why us? I've got 15 companies in my back pocket right now. We could fund every single one of them between 500,000 to 3 million. With more money, we could hit some pretty good numbers in returns.
Anything else any final things you want to share with our listeners today?
I don't know. I mean, listen, this is, we're in crazy times right now, right? In so many ways. You have to find what you love and you got to go for it. No matter what obstacles are put in your way. Raising capital for the last 2 years has been insane. If I quit, I'd be like every other person that quit out there. Entrepreneurs don't quit. Okay.
Yep.
They get up, they pull their pants on one leg at a time. They take their lumps, they take their shots, and they go to bed at night worrying about everything. And then they wake up the next morning to do it all over again. I would tell your listeners, the number one thing, you only fail if you give up. That's it,
Absolutely.
man.
Absolutely.
You only fail if you give up. If you give up, that's when you fail. And you can either fail forward or you can fail backwards, right? So I'd rather keep smashing my head against this wall and failing forward than get up tomorrow morning and say, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm not that guy.
Great advice. So where can people learn more about your fund and get in contact with you?
AlethiaVP.com, AlethiaVP.com. That is our website. Has our brands on there as of now. I think my direct telephone number, my cell phone number is on it. And if it's not, I'm pretty easy to find. Just send me an email. I hide from no one, good, bad, or indifferent. So,
awesome.
My cell rings. We've got brands all over the world right now that I'm working with in one way or another. I'm a guy who doesn't sleep more than about 3 hours a night. So I take telephone calls at 2 a.m., 5 a.m., 7 a.m. It doesn't matter. It is what it is.
You're talking to the choir right here. So
yeah.
Well, Mike, thanks for being on the podcast today. If you listen in, make sure you check out his portfolio, check out his brands, and go to your local liquor store and buy the brands he's offering. And if you want to learn more about him, reach out to us. And I tell everybody, if it's something you didn't like today, tell me. If there's something you loved in the podcast, tell everybody else. Like, follow, share, comment. And thank you, Mike, again for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Well, Scott, you've been working in this industry for a long time. I mean, as we mentioned on the last show, that you had a craft beer company before and exited that. So you've been in and around this. It's a complex, layered industry.
It is. And it's not a typical CPG type industry. You've got national and statewide regulations to deal with. You've got operational issues to deal with. You've got a product that has to be high quality all the time and consistently. And I think that takes a specialization in not just how to invest, but how to grow a brand in the beverage industry.
Yeah, one of the things that really surprised me about, because when we were talking about this in the setup, right? You were talking about how fast they want to exit, right? Like 3 to 5 years, sometimes 5 to 7, but they're really trying to focus on that quicker exit than most brands. Yet he said in your interview that he was warning young brands against immediately signing with these major distribution partners or going into too many states too fast.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, because the biggest problem, and he made this a really good point, and Mike Solo in the previous episode did the same thing, is that you have to be careful not to overproduce. It sounds on the surface that if you get a Walmart or a Bevmo or one of these major brands to sign on to you, that's the good news. The bad news is the tremendous amount of capital and time and expense it takes to service that account. And what Mike tries to tell these brands is that, look, grow fast, but grow smart and grow strategic. And that's really what they bring to the table with their expertise. They got A-list investors. They've got a whole network of people that understand the business cold. And I think the reality is it gives these spirit, emerging spirit companies, a little more perspective and a little more balance in terms of having fast growth, but not growth at all costs.
Right. And both of them emphasize this sort of building that local presence and getting it so strong, which I think, think about it from that perspective of growth, right? It's really strong roots where you start.
Well, you could be, if you're in a major market, like let's call it Miami or New York, California, LA, Chicago, you have plenty of business to be had in that metropolitan area. So, don't be too excited about going to Bozeman, Montana right away. build strong in your backyard.
Yeah, such good advice. I love that. The other part that I thought was really interesting about is how many success stories in so many different categories they have in their portfolio.
He's been able to, have success in the wine industry, in the spirit, in the water industry. He's Maker Wine has been great. What he's doing with, Gay Water, picking a great niche, that market has so much disposable income and is really not being marketed, with a brand that speaks to them. And so he's been able to really do some great things in those areas. And, the ready to drink cocktail market is huge. And they've been able to take advantage of that because you've got a younger demographic now that they don't drink as much and they want things that are more branded towards them as opposed to, they're not drinking your father's, Manhattan as much as you might think. So,
yeah. And this idea, so we mentioned this at the beginning, functional non-alcoholic beverages, that confounded me. I had to go look it up. I was like, this is a category? Like, what is that?
Well, if you break each word down, there's an irony. Okay. I don't think I've ever been more functional after drinking an alcoholic beverage. I may think I was, but I may not have been. So, functional non-alcoholic beverages, I think it's an interesting term, but also provides a term, like I said, for this younger demographic. They may not be drinking as much for pure alcohol. They're going to drink other types of beverages that, liquid water is a good example of that. That was, Rockstar water in a can and, became a multi-billion-dollar company. So they understand that there's a number of subcategories within the beverage industry at large that can be very successful.
Yeah, I blame my son-in-law for hooking my younger daughters, including my 11-year-old, on Liquid Death, which is just water. It's just in a really cool can, but it has added vitamins, minerals, adaptogens. I'm like, okay.
I'm old enough to remember when my water came out of a faucet, not in a bottle. So
exactly. I know. So anyway, when I was looking it up, I was like, that's a lot of stuff to be putting in your water.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Maybe we're just too old school for some of that, but maybe. I'm telling you, the younger generations I'm raising are all thrilled with this stuff, so they should do well.
For sure, absolutely, and they understand the branding of the products is extremely important in the process.
That's one of the things that fascinates me the most about the beverage industry in general. It's like, it's that how critical that brand, the design of the cans or the bottles, or just that packaging is so essential.
Yeah, the reality is that's been a case for decades. It's becoming more important now. Hell, I remember seeing a report on some news program about Perrier water. They branded that coming out of some beautiful, majestic, water source. And, then you go to the processing plant, it's going through a pipe, and so the reality is that brand is important, to get that shelf space we talked about before and get those consumers, to adapt.
And I think sometimes that the startups and the founders forget that their story is actually the essence of what becomes that value. And if you spend a lot more time working on that grassroots local market, you're going to understand that the story and you play, like that's part of the process.
Well, I think when you are, especially in some of these specialty beverages or even the craft, space, you're kind of like a musician or an artist. You assume your craft is the best and doesn't have to be branded. But you spend any time in the industry, you find pretty quickly that brand is important. It's the color of the bottle. It's the marking on the can. It's the name itself. I remember years ago when I was teaching in college and I told people, again, dating myself, about, the famous story about the Nova. The Nova was the number one selling car in the United States. And they tried to bring it to Mexico and it failed. And I asked the class why. Nova in Spanish means no go.
No, it's just
branding is important.
The name counts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, It is, though. This is when we were talking about it on the other Mike show. We were talking about the idea that this is aligned with e-commerce, and it's aligned with how the smaller brands started growing in the e-commerce market, is that what we really cannot forget, that everything at some point after you do the craft fairs, right? Or where you're standing at the booth giving everybody a taste, and it's okay that it's in the cask, or that it's not in the bottle. And once you get past that, it's an unassisted sale in retail.
Right.
And that means everything has to come across in the brand.
Right. At the end of the day, the consumer is still king. If they don't buy it, nothing moves forward.
Yeah. So true. Well, I loved that we had these bookends of two mics on it, but Mike Warren, Alethia Venture Partners, just a really fascinating company with such a broad base. Definitely check them out. Make sure you go to their website, and you can do that by going to emergingmanagerspodcast.com, and you'll be able to click on, find both the mics, find both their companies, find out more about them, because there's links in every blog post for every episode.
Fantastic. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everybody. Exactly. We'll be back with some more interviews, maybe not in the beverage industry, but definitely have some more interviews coming up here on Emerging Managers Podcast.
Join Scott Kelly, Tracy Hazard, and their high-performing capital fund manager guest next week on the Emerging Managers Podcast. Don't miss our upcoming virtual and live VC Fast Pitch and podcast events. For more details, background on our guests, or an application to be our next guest, visit emergingmanagerspodcast.com. Don't miss out on shaping the future of venture capital and entrepreneurship with us by joining our robust community of innovators and investors today.